Is this the desert calling the tropical rainforest?
Yes. All right, everybody, we are back. This is Creativity is the Cure. I'm your host, Malcolm Moore, and today I have a super cool guest, one of my favorite people on the planet, Mr. John McNeill. How are you doing today, John?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for this interview, and looking forward to it, Malcolm. And as we were saying a little bit earlier, but it's a little warm here in Rochester, New York. That's where I grew up, and that's where I still am. So,
what's the weather like today? I hear you guys are getting some humidity.
Yeah, it's in the upper 80s, low 90s, and the humidity is up there, and I'm inside with the AC cranked.
I agree. That's the only way to go. Yep, we are out here in the desert. It's only 80 now, but it's very dry, so just hanging out with the lizards and the ravens, as one does. Let's start out by saying how we know each other. A long time ago, I think it was late 70s, I think it was around 1978, my father, James Moore, went to a Rochester Philharmonic concert. After the concert, he knew that I was a drummer and he was looking for a teacher, so he approached John Beck. And John recommended you. And so that's how I started taking lessons with you. And I think I took lessons from you from maybe 78 to around... I think it stopped when I graduated high school, so 84, 85. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's probably pretty close to it. I know it wasn't after you graduated high school, so it was probably maybe middle school through high school.
Yeah, well, a little bit elementary, the tail end of it. Yeah. Okay.
I didn't know that piece that your dad had talked to John Beck, who was my teacher. And was timpanist in the orchestra.
Yeah.
I didn't know that piece about the connection on how you got my name, but he was very good. John Beck was very good about because people would be approaching him saying, you give lessons, and I've got a son or a daughter that would really like to take lessons, and he was dealing with mostly the collegiate students at Eastman School of Music.
Right.
So he didn't have the ability, nor did he want to teach the younger ones. He had done that for years when he was in the head of the preparatory department, percussion. He was the percussion teacher in what we call the prep department. Today they call it the community education department. But So he would often pass my name around. Another guy that had a studio in town was Dave Mancini, and he would pass his name around, and so that I did get a number of students on referral basis from John Beck. So.
Right, and if I remember correctly, John was much more focused on percussion. He was a good drummer, though, because I remember he played drum set at my older sister Jennifer's wedding. He was a pretty good jazz drummer.
Yeah, that was his fun part. He loved playing the set, and he would, like you said, he was good at it. But as we're all trained, for the most part, you try to be as versatile as possible, and you cover as many bases as you can. So not only the standard percussion instruments of mallets and timpani and snare drum, bass drum, and all that stuff, but also drum set. John was played with a number of different groups. He had his own little band for a while, John Beck Trio.
Yep.
But he was so busy between teaching and playing in the Philharmonic.
Yeah.
Those gigs were far and few between, but he did them. Whenever he had the opportunity. He loved to play.
Such a great sense of humor, too. Very funny guy. Well, as you know, I turned out to be a drum teacher, highly influenced by you, and I still do it today. And I have great memories of you teaching me. I wrote down a few things. I remember waiting in the waiting room, reading Modern Drummer. That's how I became obsessed with that magazine. The way that you taught me doing snare drum and drum set, and also within the drum set, doing exercises to learn rhythms, but also playing with popular songs of the day. I still use that model today because I think if you don't keep your student interested in music that they like, then they don't have as much as incentive to learn.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that was pretty much my philosophy when I was with my private lessons, studio lessons. That varied a little bit when I got into the more collegiate teaching because you had more of standards that you had to meet in the colleges. But for my private lessons, most of the kids who come along want to take lessons because they think it's fun.
Yeah.
And I tried to make it fun. And like you just mentioned, playing along with music that they were familiar with,
right,
inspired them to practice a little bit more. I was thinking the other day that I probably in my private studio, probably over the 40 to 50 years that I taught private lessons,
right.
I probably had maybe 800 to 1,000 students.
Wow, that is crazy.
Over the years. And out of that, I would say probably 6 to 10 to 12 actually went on and made music a career.
Right.
Either as performance or other facets of the music industry. So the 950 other students, just I was thinking, there were times when long day, and I'd have a kid come in and be like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and I'd been going since 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and
yep.
got to teach one more half-hour lesson, and the kid comes in and he hasn't looked at that material since the last time he was in my studio.
That's a common occurrence with me too.
Yeah, and I just said, okay, God, you know what? I'm going to take his $20 and I'm going to put it towards buying some food or paying the rent or
right,
whatever.
Right.
So
I think you learn not to take that personally after a while. I would say just like you, about 80% of the students, they don't practice. And a lot of times if I get there and they perform well for me, I go, are you just lucky or did you actually practice this week?
And are they honest with you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. I would change things up a little bit if a student would say to me, like in high school, they might say, Mr. McNeill, I really want to get into music, and what do I need to do? Well, then we would have,
right.
I called it the come to Jesus talk.
Yeah.
Basically, here's what you need to do, and here's the audition procedure, and here's the pieces we need to put together for you to take an audition at whatever school you're deciding to apply to.
Right.
So, and I said, we can do that, and you can do it, but it's going to take a lot of work, and, it's not going to be all just, playing to Beatles music or playing to Stones music
right.
or whatever. You're gonna have to really learn some other stuff. And I said, you can always go back to playing the music you enjoy, but right now you're gonna have to focus things a little different. And I had a few kids that did go on and did go into music. One student, it's interesting, he's still here in town, and it's kind of sad in a way because he still plays. He still plays with a lot of different bands.
Right.
But he decided that him and his girlfriend bought a house and he had to make more serious kind of money.
Right.
So he went back to school and got a degree in medical technology.
Right.
And so now he's working at Strong Memorial Hospital as a technician. And I guarantee, he'll have a job until he doesn't want to have a job because of that need for those kind of people. But he still plays, but he shifted from music being his occupation to just being a vocation, just having fun with it. And you have to be flexible in this day and age. You got to be not only versatile in all of your musical abilities, but you're going to have to possibly maybe shift some gears and do some other things to make a living.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
It is very challenging. When I moved out here to California in 2013, My plan was to be a professional drummer, but then I found out the money wasn't great. And a lot of the drummers I ran into and met had become producers because they needed to actually make money.
Yep. Yep. It's still in the business. It's still in the field, but it's a little different focus. The focus is a little different. The performing piece of it is so hard. They just had a percussion audition for the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra
Right.
This past year, not for my position that I left, but for the principal, because the principal percussionist, Jim Tiller, he retired due to some hand and physical issues about a year, 2 years ago now, I guess.
Right.
And they had something like over 200 people apply, and they narrowed it down to something like, I think, less than 30 that actually came and auditioned, and out of the 30 they chose just one person.
Wow.
So the competition, and that's for Rochester. So if you can just imagine what the competition would be like for like a seat in the Boston Symphony or the LA Philharmonic or whatever. I mean, it's just incredibly competitive.
Yeah, a lot of those jobs are few and far between. So I wrote down a couple other memories. Number one, I always liked being greeted by Poco the dog with a pink nose.
Yeah.
He was kind of your secretary.
Well, she was always like interested in seeing who was coming, and she was friendly enough, so she would always greet the people. And if she could get her nose around the door, she could smell the person. Didn't have to see them. But this one student, a young girl, she nicknamed Poco. She says, "That's your dog." She says, I call her Eraser Nose because her nose looked like a little eraser. So that was, she went by Eraser Nose to that one student. But yeah, no, that's true. She did. She always liked to see who was there. Then I have to tell her, Poco, go upstairs. And she'd run right upstairs.
Yes. Yeah, I have found, this is kind of shocking, but a lot of times if I'm not teaching in my studio, I'll drive around Hollywood to people's houses. I would say 90% of the houses have a dog, and the dogs like the drums. A lot of times they will sit in front of the bass drum, which blows my mind because I thought it'd be too loud. But I always look forward to seeing the different dogs. There's two really funny ones. One of them, his name is Wally. When I come over, he will not stop barking until he can sit on my foot, and he looks up at me.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's another one named Hannah, and she'll growl unless I keep petting her. So I've had to learn to teach this student with my left hand while I'm petting the dog with my right hand.
Wow, how do you do a roll? Just a one-handed roll.
Well, we know because of Buddy Rich, right? The one-handed roll.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. That was one thing. I only went to a few students' homes when I first started out my private studio in like 1970 or something like that.
Yeah.
I did go, I got referred and I went to their homes. But it wasn't the best situation because of what you just mentioned. You had not only the animals, but you had the other members of the family coming and going. And you're giving a lesson and you're trying to get the kid to, keep the bass drum on 1 and 3 and a hi-hat on 2 and 4. And the little sister's screaming at him going, You told me.
Or the one that always blows me away is when the parents want to sit there and stare at their child while you're teaching them. It's very intimidating to the student.
Of course. I had some parents ask if they could set in, and I said, well, I'll tell you what. I said, I'm going to close the door because I said it's going to make your son feel much more comfortable.
Yeah.
And I said, and you're going to get to hear everything. I said that you're not going to miss anything. And they went, oh, really? And I said, sure. So as soon as I closed the door, I told the kid, I whispered to the kid, go over on the drum set, and I'm going to get on my drum set, and we'll play real loud. And so we do that, and you hear all the parents go, oh, I'm going to go to the car. I'll be right back. So
well, with the technology these days, too, often if I go to someone's house, because we're in LA, they'll have electronic drums, so we keep the volume down.
Okay.
I'll often bring a Bluetooth speaker, and I'll bring a cajon, so I don't have to keep going back and forth between the drum set unless it's something very complicated. And so it's easier on the ears these days with the kids because of electronic drums. And also, a lot of the parents don't have to stay in the room because these days, a lot of people have cameras in every room. And so they can do other stuff and watch.
It's
a different world.
I mean, Mr. McNeill, why were you picking your nose and scratching your rear end? Was my son that bad? Yes, he was.
I wrote down the first song you ever taught me was Start Me Up by the Rolling Stones, and I still remember it clearly. And my younger students that listen to this will not know what I'm talking about, but you will. I remember you would write out sheet music on dittos. Is that correct?
Yes.
At the beginning, right? They had like the blue ink, and when you printed it, it would still be a little bit wet and warm, and it had a smell verging on like ether.
Yes. All of the above is true. And come to find out that wet, nice ether smell was probably very toxic, not only to the student, but for the teacher. It was called a mimeograph machine.
Yeah.
But it had fluid in it. You might remember it at school.
Oh, yeah. We had it at school.
Okay, so you know, I don't remember when they completely got away from those things, but it was probably when Xerox copiers got to the point where they were affordable and they were not the huge monstrosities that they originally were. Then schools could get them, and they would use those, obviously, for making paper copies. But the ditto was, you wrote this on this master. It was called the ditto master.
Yeah.
And it was like you had carbon paper in it, but not quite carbon paper, but whatever that material was. So, and then you'd put that thing, you would attach it to the drum, and you could rotate this drum, and it would print these copies. But again, it had that smell, and yeah, I didn't have one here at my studio at home. I used the school, like at SUNY Oswego or at Roberts
I always
Wesleyan.
wondered how you did that.
Yeah, I'd use their equipment and then make some copies and then pass them out. I did find one of those not too long ago when I was cleaning up some stuff here, and I said, I'm going to save that. It's not much. You can't read it very well anymore, but it's still there, but it doesn't have the smell anymore. No, it's gone.
Well, at that time in history, things were not too healthy, because I remember at the same time I was eating things like Velveeta and Steakums, which aren't truly food. You got to wonder when you go to get cheese at the store and it's not in the chilled section. It's just on a shelf.
Or, yeah, it's in a jar. Yeah, it's like, you know, you pour it out over some kind of, you know, genetically produced food. But back then we didn't know anything. We just ate it. We thought it was good.
We didn't think about that.
Cheese sandwich, you know, the bread wasn't even bread. Back,
Wonder Bread.
Wonder Bread. Well, that stuff was like, you know, if you ever saw it, so it came out as liquid, you know, and then they'd make bread out of it, and you'd have that with cheese with Spam. Ooh,
wonderful Spam.
Healthy food we had. Yes.
Yes. Back then, nobody worried about gluten. They just consumed all kinds of stuff.
Well, gluten and sugar; those were your two main things to eat. You know, protein? No. Just give me candy and pastries.
Exactly. So I wrote down the hardest song you ever taught me. It was King Crimson, Three of a Perfect Pair. And I remember I'd never heard of the band. So you introduced me to so much music. And I remember why that song was so difficult. I mean, looking back at my life, the drummer who influenced me more than any other drummer was Bill Bruford. And until then, you'd given me these songs where it's like, here's the beat for the verse, here's the beat for the chorus, here's the beat for the bridge, like a Phil Collins song. But when you gave me 3 of a perfect pair, I was like, good God, this changes every measure. I do watch it like a hawk. The coordination was so difficult on that song. I've only taught that song to maybe 2 or 3 of my most advanced students, but that is a hard one.
Yes. And I had different songs that I would have, like Start Me Up was a pretty easy. You just had to get past the first
beat that's on.
First
I was talking to to Christopher, and I was like, he hits the snare on the 1.
Yes. Yeah. But you don't know if that was 1 because they might have counted it off. And that was actually 2, but or 4 or whatever. But yeah, that was Charlie Watts was playing around, and so once you got that straight in your head, Start Me Up was pretty straightforward. But then, kind of like you were saying, maybe a middle level thing would maybe be Phil Collins, because back at that time in the 80s, Genesis was still going, and Phil Collins had left the band a while, but he had his own group.
Right.
And I would do some, I used Phil Collins. Doobie Brothers, I liked them a lot.
Yep. I remember we did Jay Giles, Centerfold. That was a good one.
Yep. Centerfold. And I would try to, find some things that I could easily write down. Some of the Toto stuff was a little tricky, like Roseanne.
Jeff Porcaro. Wow.
Yeah, Jeff stuff. I mean, anything Vinny was on. I loved, obviously Steve, but, he didn't have his own band. He was playing on a lot of different people. So I had a lot of stuff with Steve.
Well, actually, I remember you took me to Red Creek to see Steve play with the Gadd Gang.
Did I do that?
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember going with you.
Yeah, they played there. Was that the night the ceiling tiles fell in?
No, I don't remember that. I don't think so.
One night they were there. Tony, you can ask Tony. He'll remember. But they were playing, and a ceiling tile just came down, fluttered down, and landed on Steve's drums. And he just threw it to the floor and kept going.
I'm surprised he didn't play on it with brushes.
Well, that place was a little funky, but a lot of great bands played there and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How old were you at that time? You probably were like 17, maybe?
Yeah,
16,
I think 17? It was, I'll have to look it up, 87,
Man, your parents were trusted me, I guess, to take you out there. Wow.
Well, actually, I have a really
I'm not
funny...
sure that would happen today.
Yeah, I know. You got to be careful. It's a different world. One of my best memories is you got me into Steve Smith, and this is the point where he was kicked out of Journey, and he had, what was his great band? They did that album, Global Beat. Oh, Vital Information. So I wanted to go, I heard they're going to play Red Creek. I think I was 15, so this is 1985. Should be right around then. My mom had to drop me off because I couldn't drive yet. And I went into the club, and at the door, of course, they found out how old I was, and they kicked me out. And so I didn't know what to do because my mom dropped me off. There's no cell phones. So I'm in the parking lot. And then I see Tom Coster and Steve Smith, and they come up and ask me what's going on. I was like, yeah, my mom dropped me off. They won't let me go. I'm not old enough. And Steve is like, that's not cool. So he brings me in, puts me in the front row. And not only did I get to see the show, but I got to hang out with those guys after the show. And I think it was maybe 9 years ago or so, I was at the NAMM show and I ran into him. And he was with his wife, and I sat down and told him the story. Of course, he didn't remember, but I said, I want to thank you. That's one of my best memories ever. Wow.
Yeah. No, he was playing, a lot of bands played at the Creek.
Weather Report, I think, right? Because I know that Jocko played there.
Could be. I remember seeing Miles, but it wasn't there. It was some other club on Henrietta Road. And it was it was when he was doing his electric
Right.
stuff.
It's around like the
And
tutu era or earlier than that.
boy, I'd have to do some research, but
Yeah.
I remember the drummer was, I think, man, drawing a blank now. He played,
We could.
just died not too long ago. But anyways, his drummer was amazing. But Miles came out, and it cost a lot of money, and Miles did his. I mean, he didn't want to be playing there, and so he made it pretty obvious. And he'd come out and do his thing, and then let the band play for 45 minutes, and then come back out and
Yeah.
do a couple of more things, and then the next, that would be the end of the show, and then another show, because he was doing 2 shows, and I think they were only there 1 or 2 nights. But I did get to see him and heard him, but it wasn't well, I grew up listening to the early Miles with Tony and Tony Williams and
Jimmy
those
Cobb
guys
and all those guys. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so this was kind of a stretch. I knew what he was doing. I mean, it wasn't like I went in there completely blind,
Right.
So I knew that he had, was into the electric stuff, and I heard, but it was like I remember it was like $30 or $40 and for a ticket,
That was a lot back
which
then.
was pretty pricey back in
Right.
like 81 or 2 or something like that. And but yeah, the Red Creek was kind of an interesting, funky place. But I don't know if Steve played there with Stuff, the band Stuff. He might have.
I saw him with Gadd Gang. I also remember I went with you to see Jerry Marotta play with Robbie Dupree.
Okay.
That was really good.
Was Tony Levin playing bass?
Yes. And
okay.
I mean, we were pretty lucky. Rochester was a great jazz town. There's so many amazing players that came through there.
Yes, absolutely. And we also just lost a great one last week when passing to Chuck Mangione.
Yeah, such an amazing player. Such a big influence. And a lot of the young people, like my sons, know him from King of the Hill.
Yes. Yeah, that's the funniest thing, because I've read a couple of obituary things, and I didn't catch that, but I had heard that he was like he wasn't on every week, was it? Just like occasionally.
No, he
would
was
do like a voiceover or something.
He was like a secondary character that would appear from time to time. Yeah, he was really funny though.
But they recognized him because he had a hat and stuff like that.
The man with a hat. Yeah. It's funny with my students. I taught music out here for 12 years. And a lot of my younger students, when I would do something like mention a celebrity or an actor or musician, I remember one time I asked them something about Ray Romano, and then dead silence. Nobody knows who he is. And I go, all right, he is the woolly mammoth in Ice Age. And then they're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird how those things happen, But like you said earlier, it's a different world we're living in, and with the technology and everything today I'm glad I've retired from especially teaching. When I retired from SUNY Oswego, that was my last. Actually, my last teaching thing was my private studio when I retired, and I got out in 2019. I had 2 students, and they were seniors, and they graduated, and then I just said that was it.
Yeah.
And the long and short of it, I was really glad that I didn't even try to go any further, because then obviously COVID hit in March of 20, and everything shut down. Obviously, the story there. So, but my last teaching, college teaching, was SUNY Oswego, and I retired in 2012, and everything was going digital, virtual, whatever, and I was just barely hanging on, because all the grades had to be turned in online and all of this, and they had to learn all this technology. And we had a really great music secretary who would help a lot of us that didn't have that expertise. But the younger folks coming in, I mean, they had no problem with it. But I remember one time calling her up, and she had to talk me down off a cliff because I was ready to commit suicide. And all I was trying to do was turn my grades in, and the computer at SUNY Oswego was not recognizing my password, and I was ready to scream and holler and whatever. And I remember her saying, "No, John, it's okay. You're going to be fine."
Yeah, the
Yeah.
technology it's beyond what they call the singularity. I feel like it changes every month. I remember sometimes you would give me a really hard song and I'd go home. I had this great record player that was a bench and had speakers, and you would you could actually sit on it when you listen to records. But my record player would play at 45, 33, 78, but most importantly, 16. So I could take the things,
Oh, yeah.
I
Yep.
could slow it down. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was trying to teach a student a certain thing, and they go, "Oh, let's slow it down." And we were using YouTube, and I was like, "What?" And then they showed me how to go into YouTube and slow it down, and the pitch didn't change. And I was like,
Wow.
"Whoa." So yeah, a lot of times the technology is changing so quickly. I just hand my phone to the students, and they show me how to do stuff. I mean, that's the way it is.
And I would be handing my phone to you,
Yeah.
and then you could hand it to your student. It's kind of like we're passing the torch.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and actually, speaking of COVID, it was really difficult not only to teach music class, but especially drum lessons over the phone or Zoom or something like that, because back then the latency issues were terrible. So I would often have my drum students start first because it was depending on how far you were from the person you're contacting and their internet speed. So it was almost impossible. So I would have a class of, let's say, all 66 of the second graders. I'm trying to get everybody to sing along and play instruments, but it was a nightmare because I'm flipping through 3 pages of 66 kids. There's latency issues. The kids are smarter than me. They learned how to hack it and like cross me out. And then write disturbing things on there. It was so difficult. And these days, the latency is much better. But boy, teaching over Zoom, that was very challenging.
Well, and the thing is that I mean, obviously, preaching to the choir, this, but there was a whole bunch of people of my age bracket that were still active, still teaching.
Right.
And all of a sudden, they had just started to put their feet in the water, so the toes in the water, so to speak, with the computer technology. But COVID comes along, and you had to immediately, sink or swim.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of them just retired. They just gave up. They just said, I can't deal with this. And a lot of it, I talked with a lot of the teachers who were doing college stuff and trying to do, like you said, lessons one-on-one or even a class. And I said, how's that going? And they said, horrible, absolutely horrible. They said, it's unfair to the students. They're paying money, but it's unfair to us because we're the teachers and we're frustrated. Yeah. They're frustrated. And the administration's going, do the best you can.
Everybody was losing their minds, even the parents.
And the parents too, because they're obviously paying money for a lesson and it's not happening. The kids are going, Dad, something's wrong. What's wrong with my, laptop? And
what saved me is because I grew up in the time of all the early drum machines and sequencers. I had worked with a lot of machines that had latency issues. So as a drummer, and I'm sure, because I remember you had the Roland 707, a lot of times you would hit the pad and you wouldn't get the sound until a millisecond later. So just like I learned how to program with those things, with those issues, when I would be teaching students, I would count the seconds as a drummer. Like, so if we were all going to sing together, I would follow them and I would only pick like 3 or 4 students because it would just go crazy with all the issues and I could make it work, but it took me using my drum skills to count the seconds and realize how far off it was.
Yeah. And when you're trying to play, especially when you're trying to adapt to students and the students having rhythm problems to start with, you're really struggling to do it, 25 miles apart.
Up until that point, I had taught recorder, which is horrifying if you've ever taught that and you're there on the first week. It's just the most terrible sound. Makes all the dogs cry. So after after COVID, all the parents came to me and said, can we stop doing recorder? And that's because they couldn't handle the pandemic with a terrible recorder playing at home. So ever since then, I switched to teaching ukulele. It was a little more easy on the ears.
I'm just thinking, don't, I hope it never gets to the point where you have to switch to accordion because you'll give up completely.
I used to sell those when I worked at the House Guitars. Yep. For a while there. I was running the top floor that had synthesizers, drums, any kind of computer software, but for whatever reason, Blaine decided to keep the accordions up there, and he was a great player. And I never got good at playing the accordion, but I will often have Blaine come upstairs and demo them, and I knew which brands were good and this and that. So, yeah, luckily I was never forced to learn accordion.
Speaking of the second floor of House of Guitars, I just remember one time when I stopped down to get a part, I needed like an extension on a cymbal stand.
I know what you're going to say.
You said, I think we got one of those. And you disappeared into this mountain of hardware and you were gone. I said, Malcolm, where the heck are you? I heard your voice.
I was in a pile of hardware.
It was like 10 feet of drum parts.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you were down on your hands and knees and looking around, and all of a sudden you came up and you go, will this work? And I said, that's it. That's what I want. I said, and you tried really, really hard to organize that. I remember you spent a lot of time getting things so it looked like it looked like it was a music store instead of like, some kind of a metal recycling plant.
Well, I was there in the 90s, and before me, there had been a lot of drummers, a lot of keyboard players, and it was kind of a disaster. And the thing that really drove me nuts, I mean, I had a lot of wonderful memories there. However, this was challenging because the people before me, there were all these Sonar drum sets that were up on those shelves, and the people before me let customers come in and just be like, oh, I want that snare stand, I want that tom stand. So by the time I got there was like 5 or 6 Sonar drum kits with no hardware, and they were such old kits that I couldn't replace them. It was it was a crazy thing.
Some of that's it's like Rogers drums, I mean, they went out in the 80s maybe or something like that, 90s, whatever. But one of the things was when you were there, I could go down and I could, either you could go look or you'd let me go look over, and you could find something that would work.
Oh yeah.
Because a lot of times those the hardware that I was looking for was the older hardware,
right? The thinner,
which was thinner and not as large in diameter. And now they've got hardware that's you could probably jack up your house with, or support your house with. But back then it was some other stuff, so you had to have the right diameter, and they had it, but you just had to go look for it in this pile. But I remember looking around there, and I thought, you could go over there and have something fall on you, not go home and say, whatever happened to Malcolm? I don't know. He went to work, but he never came home. It's like
I would say to my coworkers, man, if OSHA comes in here, we're in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. They would shut it down in a heartbeat.
But they're still going.
They still are. And they're still selling drums.
We had I don't know if it's still there, but there was a room in the back over the record section where it had vintage, I would say, analog things. And I would there was piles of stuff. I remember finding an 808, a 909, Taurus pedals, and a lot of times people like Les Claypool would come in and want to dig through all the vintage stuff. And there's some really cool things back there.
They probably know exactly how much it's worth too today, so they're not letting it go like, cheap. So
they're sitting on a gold mine there. Yeah. when I was younger, you introduced me to a lot of who are either favorite musicians of mine today or become friends, especially Tony Levin. I remember I was really getting into Peter Gabriel, and we had learned all this stuff. And then you took me backstage to a rehearsal of Peter Gabriel, and this must have been 86 for the So tour. And I remember, I have all these memories. Well, first of all, that was the only time my mom let me skip school because she knew my favorite singer was there. So I remember I took the day off, went there. That experience really changed my life. And that's where I met Manu Katché. And I actually saw Manu last year, and he remembered that because ever since then, I would go backstage every tour and hang out with Tony. Just wonderful. So I wanted to thank you for that. That was such a good memory. I remember just being completely astonished to be backstage and see how these guys would put the shows together.
Tony and I've known Tony since about 1967, 68, because we were in school together at Eastman. I think Tony's a year older than I am. Tony and Steve is 1 year older.
Yeah.
Maybe two. I'm not sure. One or two. But I've known him for years, played in bands with him when we were at Eastman. We both played in Gap Mangione's little trio over at the place called The Other Side of the Tracks.
Yeah.
It was really Steve's gig, but Steve was very busy and he was trying to graduate college, and so he had a bunch of stuff. So I would often go over there and do like the first set or two, and then Steve would show up and play the rest of the night. But I got to know Tony through that experience, and then we just stayed connected, and we're still connected to this day. We don't see each other nearly as much, obviously, but when he comes through town with his Stickman or Levin Brothers. Yeah. I didn't go see the King Crimson Revisited tour. I didn't see that. That was a year or so ago. But anyways, Tony was playing with Peter Gabriel. So I knew he had said that he was going to be in town for a whole week. And I said, really, a week? And he goes, yeah, Peter's putting the final touches on this tour. He booked at that time it was called the Rochester War Memorial.
Right.
But, it's something different now, Blue Cross Arena or something like that. But anyways, it's the downtown big. That's where the Amerks play and so forth and so on, the hockey team. So he got us in. Actually, he got me in, and I said, when we were talking, I said, I have a student who's really interested and would love to come. Would it be okay? And he said, yeah, what's his name? And I gave him your name. But it was like a rehearsal, a final rehearsal before the opening show. And so they did have an audience that was there by invitation only. And so we got to see how it was put together. And I think if I remember correctly, there were a couple of technical issues. They had to go back and start again and do something. But that's the whole purpose of putting the rehearsal and everything. Did we go back after? Did we see Tony afterwards? So I don't remember.
I do remember talking to him, and then we went. It was one of the, not a bar, but there was like some restaurant that was attached to the hotel he was staying. Because I remember we went and talked to him after that. You know what you're making me think of is not too earlier before that. I remember when Spinal Tap came out in 1984. And you and I were talking about it, and you're like, you know what, Malcolm, I was just talking to Tony, and he goes, Tony told you that some of it was funny, but some of it was too true to life. Like when they got lost underground, when they're trying to get to the stage, you're like, you said that a lot of your musician friends said that it was too true to life.
That was true because it had just come out, and you said it was 84, but and I remember talking with Tony, and he said that they were in, I think he said Glasgow, Scotland, with Peter's band, and And they did that. They came in from the back of the auditorium, and there's a video, you probably can find it on YouTube, but of them coming in. They marched in. Peter's idea, we're going to start in the back, and we're going to march down through the crowd, and the people will go crazy, and then we'll walk up on stage and do the show.
Yeah, it was Rhythm in the Heat, because they would all play that African rhythm.
Yes. Okay. Yes, exactly. And he said in Glasgow, Scotland, they got down and they couldn't figure out where they said they could hear the people screaming and hollering, but they couldn't figure out how to get. They had someone that was from the theater showing them, but they got strung out. And so some of them got up there real quick, but Tony said they were like walking around and opening doors, and they couldn't figure out how to get up there, and they're yelling, and they couldn't be heard. And you can just imagine. So when the Spinal Tap had that exact same kind of thing happen, and they walked by the janitor about 5 times, He go, I don't know how to do it. Yeah, that was priceless. And the other thing was the lady who became their agent was booking the band Spinal Tap according to their astrological signs. That's how the gigs were coming up. And Tony says, that's so true. He says something that is so true. And so I love that. Every once in a while I'll put that on and just laugh because. Yeah.
Well, for fans of Spinal Tap, this sequel is about to come out, and the preview looks really funny.
Is it still the same people?
It's the same people, and if you watch the trailer, there's a funny part where they contact Questlove on Zoom to ask him if he wants to be the drummer of the band. He's like, no way, because he knows the drummers in the band are cursed.
They just explode.
Yeah, and that's where the line, you can't dust for vomit. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, no, that was like, that wasn't a good gig because they went through a lot of drummers.
Yeah, I think you're right. One of them did explode.
Yeah, he's just playing, and all of a sudden there's this big splash, and it's gone. He was replaced by somebody else.
What is your earliest memory of using the creative part of your brain?
I didn't know this until many, many years later when my mother told me that when I was about 2 years old, according to her, she said, you were constantly tapping on things. and they said everything, you would pick up your spoon, and hit the high chair. And I'd be constantly tapping with a spoon and stuff. So 2 years old, they got me a toy drum for Christmas.
Oh, wow.
And so I had a little toy drum. Unfortunately, she said it didn't last long. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, you broke the head within about 3 or 4 days. And I said, oh, okay. I don't remember a whole lot about that, so I don't know how creative I was or wasn't. But then a little bit later, she said, you were always pulling the pots and pans out from underneath the kitchen stove and playing on those while I was trying to make dinner.
Yeah.
And I thought, boy, what a pain in the ass I was. Holy Christmas. She's trying to cook dinner, and I'm lucky I didn't get like a pot of green beans spilled on my head or something, but so I started really, really early with that. And when I actually started getting into taking lessons and playing in the elementary school band and stuff, that was probably more when I was about 10, 8 to 10 years of age, something like that. But as far as creative, I've always had more of an affinity towards being creative and doing creative type of things and thinking outside the box, and how would I do this, and if I broke this thing off of my toy, could I reattach it over here or like something?
Frankenstein.
Yeah. Whereas my brother, he had more of a, he was really good, very good in school. He had more of that left side mathematics were really easy for him.
Right.
I struggled greatly with those kind of things. And so, often later on when I was doing a lot of the RPO, the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra, had a program worked out with the city school district, the Rochester City School District. And there was a bunch of us that would go out into the schools and talk to the students. And I think it was in the 7th grade classes. And we would talk about some music that they were coming to hear the orchestra play,
right,
and stuff. But anyways, the long and short of it was people would often, a lot of the students would ask, how did I get into music, or why did I start in music? And I told them, I said, I started in music because I couldn't do anything else very well. And they'd laugh and everything, but that was more truth than not, because my grades, especially in high school, my grades were horrible. I struggled a lot, did things, I got involved more in the music and the orchestra because it was an area that I felt that I had some area of expertise, and I had taken lessons, and so I was getting better. I had kind of a sense of rhythm that worked for me and was, at least I could keep a steady beat. And so I just got into that, and that's kind of what I did for a living, and the creative side, not only in teaching, but mostly in the performing. So,
right.
So thinking, it really, if I had to sum up some things, I was blessed to have the opportunity to not only perform in a major symphony orchestra, which is definitely using your creative piece,
right,
but then also be able to teach and be able to work with students and be able to watch them grow and excel at things and have fun. And so I really enjoyed that the creative part and the academic part, and it led to a very fulfilling career. Whereas, in some situations, you either do one or the other. I was able to do both.
Right.
And so in that piece. But as far as the creative, I've always felt more on the creative side than on the more academic side of things.
Were your parents creative?
Yes, my dad, and actually one of the things that got me interested in drums was I was at my grandmother's house, and we were cleaning out a back closet one time, and I probably was maybe 10 years old or maybe little younger. I don't remember how old I was, but anyways, the long and short was we're cleaning this out, and here's a pair of drumsticks and a practice pad, and one of the old rubber practice pads,
right?
Not like the Remo ones that we use today, but
you had like the little square with a piece of rubber on it, right?
Yes, and a wood on an angle. And I said to my grandma, I said, "What is this?" And she said, "Oh, that was your dad's drumsticks. He played drums for a little bit." I said, "Well, do you have the drums?" And no, they didn't have the drums, but they had this.
Where's the drums?
So, yeah, well, and it's like about 3 minutes of banging on this little thing, and you go, this really sucks. Where are the real things, So, yes, he was more the creative person. And later on, he did a lot with music, not so much playing, but he booked a lot of different groups around town. He was an entertainment agent. And so I would go with him before I could drive, I would go with him to help set up for some bands that he had booked.
This is in Rochester?
In Rochester. And he had booked a couple of like 10, 12 piece bands, and they were playing mostly dances and stuff like that.
Right.
So they'd have music stands with the leader's name on it. And so I'd help set that up. And as I got a little bit better on playing the drums, they'd let me sit in and play one tune. And I don't remember too much about it, but I don't think I completely screwed it up, but it wasn't good. But they'd go, the leader, and he'd say, okay, Johnny, thanks very much. And, and keep practicing now. Keep practicing, son. So I'm like, oh, okay. But, so that kind of stuff sticks in your mind when you're like 12 years old. It's like,
Right.
I'm the next Buddy Rich, but not quite.
What about your mom? Was she creative at all?
In different ways. She was a nurse and held the family together. Although in our family, it was just my brother and myself, just the two of us, and then mom and dad. It was back when, in many cases, the wife would just stay at home, a stay-at-home mom. But to make it work for us, she had the opportunity to work, and so she would work, and my dad would work, and somehow they figured out the schedule so that somebody was always home when my brother and I were there, after school or whatever.
Right.
So there was always, we weren't left alone or anything like that. But my dad was definitely probably the more creative person, and my mom was much more the more practical person.
Right. Well, for everybody out there that is wondering what we're talking about, you went to this amazing music school called the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York. And correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the people that you went to school with included Tony Levin, Steve Gadd, Chuck Mangione, and Ned Corman. Is that right? Were you guys all in the same class?
Ned was there, but he was older. So he was there. My connection with Ned was later on, especially during when he was teaching in the Penfield schools.
Right.
That's where I knew Ned. I know I've played some freelance gigs with Ned over the years. He was a saxophone player.
Right.
And I know I played some gigs with him.
You would take me backstage to stuff like Peter Gabriel, but then he would bring in some of the same players. Like I remember when I went to high school at Penfield High, he brought in, let me see if I can remember, some amazing players. He brought in Steve Gadd, Tony Levin, John Faddis, Jeff Beal, much later, Chuck Mangione, all these same guys. So between you and Ned, who was my music teacher, I really got some amazing experiences.
Yeah, he knew them through Eastman, and as far as in school, I think he had graduated or was close to graduating by the time I got to school.
Right.
I got to Eastman in '66.
Okay.
I graduated high school in '65, but I didn't actually get into Eastman. I applied, but I was denied or whatever they called it. And so what I did was I went 1 year to Roberts Wesleyan College.
Right.
And then I reapplied, and I was continuing studying with John Beck. But again, because of my academic grades and stuff, I wasn't accepted as in '65, in the fall of '65. But so I started a year late in '66. So that's why I didn't. Steve and Tony, I believe they graduated in '68.
Right.
And I didn't graduate until undergrad. I didn't graduate until '70.
Right.
And so Ned might be, but Steve was there, Tony was there, Gerry Niewood and I were in the same class. So
wow.
We must have been the same age or close. Yeah, we would be playing gigs during our college years. Often we would be playing gigs, the same gig, and we'd be out till like 1 or 2 in the morning, and we would see each other for music theory class at 8:00. And we did not look good, and we did not feel good. But Gerry, being the consummate musician, he could hear all of these chord changes and everything. And the only thing I excelled at was I got the rhythm right, but I couldn't tell whether it was a dominant chord or a subdominant chord or whatever. But we played a lot of gigs together.
With Gerry?
But with Gerry, and like I said, with Tony. Interesting story regarding Steve. He was the drum set player.
Right.
When there were other people who played drum set and at school when he was there, but I mean, he was so far head and tails above everybody.
Right.
And he was in the jazz ensemble. And the jazz ensemble then, big band, was led by a guy by the name of Jack End. He was from the River campus.
Okay.
Chuck started the program because I just saw something in the newspaper about it, and it mentioned that Chuck Mangione started the program, and I believe that is correct. But he had left Eastman by 68, 67, 68. He was doing other things.
Okay.
And so this guy, Jack End. Anyways, long story short, Steve was playing, Tony was in, and a guy by the name of Mike Holmes was a piano player. And they were the rhythm section in the band. And Steve, I remember one time running into Steve going into the Eastman Theater, because all of these ensembles would be rehearsing about the same time, usually 4 o'clock to about 6 o'clock. And so I was coming out of the theater with a snare drum to take to a rehearsal that we were rehearsing someplace. And Steve's walking in with a hi-hat and a ride cymbal. And I said, where you going, Steve? And he says, I got a rehearsal with the big band. And I said, oh, okay. I said, is that all you got? He goes, that's all I got time for. He went in and played the rehearsal with a ride cymbal and a hi-hat.
Oh my God.
He might have found a snare drum someplace in there, but that's all he had. And he just swung the hell out of the band, and they didn't even know it. Just like they didn't even know it was, missing, or maybe they did, but they didn't say anything. But that's all he had. He could play on a box with brushes and make incredible music, and kick the band at the same time. But I mean, it was just remember that. And he says, that's all I got time for. So.
Back then, when you were in school, was Java Joe's around, and did you and Tony go there to have espresso?
No. That was before. Java's was there was a little restaurant there, little diner kind of restaurant. And actually it's where Java's, it's just part of Java's. They put two buildings or two stores, I guess, together to make Java's. In fact, I think Java's is 3 stores, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But anyways, there was this little restaurant where students could get, food real quick. And most people, didn't go to the dorms. The dorms at that time were way over on where the School of the Arts is today, way over on Prince Street.
Right.
So you didn't have, and if you wanted lunch, you had to go someplace or bring it to school. But this little place, and I'm trying to remember the name of it, but I'm sure Tony remembers the name of the place. But the guy was a husband and wife that owned it and ran it. And she basically would take the orders. It had maybe 6 or 8 tables and maybe about 10 stools, pretty small. But he would cook. He was in the back in the grill, and she'd take the orders and stuff. And we'd all go over there, to try to get something at lunch, including some of the faculty members. But as soon as Steve would walk in, the owner, his name was Fred, he'd come out and he'd fallen all over Steve and say, Steve, I heard you, in your concert, and you're the greatest drummer ever and everything like that. And Steve said, well, I just need some coffee. And he'd say, oh yeah, well, let me get you your coffee. But it was funny little place. Actually, I was sitting there one day at a table, and this gentleman walks in and gets coffee and sits down next to me and starts reading his book. And back then you could smoke, and
Right.
He was smoking a pipe and stuff. So got to talking with him. Come to find out, it was Alec Wilder, who's a famous composer.
Wow.
Of popular music of that time frame.
Right.
And he was in town to do something or whatever. And he was asking me, and I said, well, I'm working on this marimba piece. And he says, oh, I've always wanted to learn more about the marimba. And so, unbelievable, the people that would meet in a little diner like that,
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, there's just so much happening because of the school and all of the faculty, plus the guest artists that would be coming and going, and the soloists with the orchestra, and so forth and so on.
In my 30s, as you know, I was a minister, and you and I have a lot in common with spirituality. So I wanted to read you a quote by one of my favorite spiritual authors. His name was Henri Nouwen. He was a Dutch priest, and he's written many incredible books. And he once said, "When we honestly ask ourselves which person in our lives mean the most to us, we often find that it is those who, instead of giving advice, solutions, or cures, have chosen rather to share our pain and touch our wounds with a warm and tender hand. The friend who can be silent with us in a moment of despair or confusion, who can stay with us in an hour of grief and bereavement, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not healing, and face with us the reality of our powerlessness. That is a friend who cares."
I'm not familiar with the author. How do you spell that name? I'm going to look that up.
It's Henri and then Nouwen, Henri Nouwen. He's a very interesting guy because he was a priest. He happened to be gay, and that was not acceptable back when he was writing this stuff. And also, he had much of his life was spent in psychiatry. So the balance of the secular world and the spiritual world, and the fact that, he couldn't decide, do I want to be a priest? Do I want to work as a psychologist? But he eventually devoted his life to helping the special needs population. So for me, spending a lot of my life being a minister or a behaviorist, I've always been tremendously inspired by his writing.
Yeah, friends are few and far between. I've come to realize that true friends,
Right.
The one that you don't have any qualms about calling,
Right.
when you're in a bad situation, because they don't expect anything from you. It's not what's in it for them. It's how can I help you?
Right.
And, over the years, I've been blessed to have a few friends, not a lot, that would meet those qualifications. Unfortunately, several of them have passed on, but the kind of person that, is there for you, even if you don't ask, they're always inquiring what's going on. And it's interesting. That's an interesting quote, but there's always the friends, the business friends that you need to succeed in whatever career you're choosing.
Right.
But, often those people are not the ones that you would consider your truest friends. I was in the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra for 45 to 50 years.
Wow.
But out of all of those people that I've, musicians, I can honestly say there's only been maybe 3 or 4 that I've really got close to. And over the years, you could, working, obviously the one that comes to mind would be John Beck.
Right.
I mean, I started actually with him. He was my teacher, my mentor when I was in high school. So when I was probably about 16 years old, I started taking lessons with him, and then continued all the way through 6 years of college, undergrad and graduate degree, and then sat next to him for 40 years as a percussionist in the orchestra, and he was timpanist. So I got to see a lot of him,
Yeah.
and he was always just a very humble person. Like you said, he has a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
He could kick you in the butt when you needed it, and obviously needed it more than a few times.
Yeah.
But he was also sympathetic, because my degree was in music education, not performance. And so I had to learn all of the different instruments. So there were times where I would go into my percussion lesson not the most prepared, because I had just spent an hour trying to make a sound come out of an oboe, and not because I had another lesson on an oboe coming up later in the week, and I had to do something besides sound like a duck. or a flute or whatever.
Yeah.
And so there were times I'd go in and I'd say, Mr. Beck, I know I'm not prepared and I'll do my best, but have you ever tried to play an oboe? And he goes, hell no. He says, what are you doing with that stuff? I said, well, it's my degree in this. And he'd go, all right. He said, okay, because they used to call me Mac, M-A-C.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's all right, Mac. Okay, all right, I got you. But next week, please, can you do something with the timpani piece I gave you? Yes, Mr. Beck. Yes, sir. And I would do it. But I mean, I had that kind of stuff going on, and there was a couple of us that were in music ed, not performance. But yeah, so John Beck, Bill and Ruth Cahn, for years, it was Bill, Ruth, and myself.
Yeah.
Was the percussion section, and John Beck was the timpanist.
Yeah.
And for 20, 30 years, that's what we did.
Yeah.
Every week.
You guys were like the Four Musketeers. Yeah.
Yep. And, you could count on each other. If you screwed up, I remember Bill saying, hey, it happens to all of us,
Yeah.
So, don't let it, don't beat yourself up over it.
You mean like the Far Side comic he used to have up with the guy waiting to do the crash cymbals, but he's only got one cymbal?
Yep. I never got that bad, but I had both cymbals, but I just didn't play it at the right time.
Yeah, it's because drummers in classical music, they have to count 110 measures, and then you got one triangle hit, and if you miss it, you've epic fail.
Yeah. Well, there's an interesting story we had. We were playing this piece, a Wagner piece, and literally we had 2 or 3 bass drum hits and a cymbal crash and a triangle roll in this piece. But meanwhile, the violinists were it was 16th notes nonstop, page after page after page.
Like a Steve Reich thing.
And at the end, I'm walking out of the theater, and this one violinist goes, oh my God, my arm is ready to fall off. I haven't played so many notes. And I looked at her and I said, yeah, I understand what you mean. I said, my rear end from sitting is just about, it fell asleep. It was so hard to keep focused to play that one note.
Yeah.
And she says, oh, shut up. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, literally you'd have to sit there, and I have someplace, I don't know where it is. I never took a picture of it, but I actually have the music where it's a piece of an opera. It might be Verdi opera or something like that, but it's got 222 measures rest and then a cymbal crash. So you literally have to figure out what's going on. I mean, you can't count 220 measures.
Right. Yeah.
You have cues. You write in cues to, what's going to happen, because, nobody's going to sit there and try to count, 220 measures and then get to 218 and go, was that 18 or 19? Whoops, cymbals crash, missed.
You just hope as an orchestral drummer you get at least maybe one Aaron Copeland piece so you can get in some serious drumming.
Yes. And actually, I played a number of times under Copeland. He was probably the most famous composer, I could say, that I've ever played under with the Philharmonic. Yeah, I'm going to say it's probably in the early 70s. He came through at least 2 or 3 times to conduct the orchestra, and we did his music. And it was really pretty cool to play, like Fanfare for the Common Man.
That must have been exciting.
The only thing was, he was a little bit of an oddity. He was an amazing conductor.
Yeah.
But he had a specific sound he wanted, and he didn't want the drums to ring, to reverberate. So when you'd hit the bass drum, he would always yell, kill that sound. And he'd muffle the heck out of it. And it sounded like you were playing on the side of a box or something, a cardboard box. But he was kind of strange. He yelled at John Beck playing the timpani, kill them drums. Like,
yeah, with a concert bass drum, you can't really do the classic put your wallet on top of it.
No. no, you'd muffle it the best you could, and you'd try, but But one interesting Aaron Copeland story happened. We were playing. It was during the summertime, and we were playing a concert, fundraising concert, and they had brought him down. I think he was living in New York City, and he came to conduct us, and we were playing someplace. I'm thinking it was the Bristol Mountain. It was someplace down in Canandaigua area, and they had it was outside. They'd set up a stage for the orchestra and chairs and everything. It was a big fundraiser, big festive kind of thing. And so we finished the first half program, and there was an intermission, and then we were going to do the second half. And so I was standing outside this like RV kind of thing, and the stage manager goes over, and I didn't play the first piece on the second half. So the stage manager goes over, knocks on the door and says, "Maestro, we're ready to start the second half." And Copeland comes to the door. He had changed out of his concert attire and had changed into his just regular street attire. And he says, I really, we have another part to play? And the stage manager goes, "Yes, we have another half, a second half." He goes, "Just give me a couple minutes out." He quickly threw out his tails again and came out and conducted the second half. Come to find out, he was in his late 70s at the time, and he just got a little confused and thought he was ready to go home, but he was all dressed, not in the tails and stuff. So yeah,
wow,
had to just catch that little thing there. Stage manager looks at me and goes, "Now what?" I don't know. Tell the people we're going to be 5 minutes while the maestro changes it back into his tail.
Well, let's end with a quote by your friend Tony Levin. He once said, "People should decide what success means for them and not be distracted by accepting others' definitions of success."
Yeah, and he's a perfect example. Success can be, you can interview 10 people and you'd get 10 different answers, probably,
right.
Maybe 8 different answers. And success doesn't always mean that you're, made a lot of money and you're living, in wealth or in wonderful conditions and things like that. Success is, have you contributed anything to society or to the world?
Right.
And, I think as far as my feelings, it's being able to have had some great experiences performing has been wonderful, but also teaching.
Yes.
And, dealing with students. And often I would have students come in and, you could tell as soon as they came in the door, came into the studio, and they weren't having a good day.
Right.
And, and I would say, you seem a little down today, what's up? "Oh, I just got in a big argument with my mom on the way over, and, she doesn't understand me, and, yada, yada." And I'd say, well, without getting personal or anything, but I said, "Oh, she wants me to practice more, and she told me that if I didn't practice more, she wasn't going to pay for these lessons anymore." And I said, "Well, you got to understand, you made a commitment."
Right.
And, and so forth and so on. And we, talk a little bit. And then he, a couple of times, this one kid, he goes, one day he's leaving and he goes, his mom's in the car, so it wasn't anybody else around. He says, "Mr. McNeill," he says, "I wish I was your kid. You understand me better."
Yeah.
I went, "Well, I do now. Thank you. Here's my 15 bucks or whatever it is. And
right.
I'll see you next week." But yeah, success is, a lot of people think it's, a lot of money and great gratitudes and, platitudes and stuff like that. But you can have a successful life and you can be doing not be in the spotlight of things. As musicians, every musician I've ever come in contact with has a little bit of an ego. Yeah. We wouldn't do it if we didn't have a little bit of an ego.
Or want attention, yeah.
Yeah. We do like when people applaud. We do like when the spotlight is on us, but we don't need it all the time. So after you've worked all week and performed a great piece of music, a great concert, and the audience applauds, that's really the most important piece of it.
Yeah.
Yes, you're getting paid to do it because you need the money when you go to Wegmans to get your food, and they're not going to accept the fact that you played a great concert last night. They don't even know.
Yeah.
And in some cases, they probably don't care.
Yeah.
But so you do have to get remuneration. But success is is what you make of it. But it doesn't have to be always the greatest wealth or whatever, because we're in it for making, especially in the teaching profession, helping people, helping students to be, like you said earlier, creative,
Yeah.
do some things, look at things a different way. And in the performing part, you're making people happy.
Yeah.
People wouldn't come if they didn't enjoy what you did. You take them away from the mundane life that they might be leading and give them an hour, an hour and a half, or 2 hours worth of beautiful experience.
Yeah.
One guy, when I was on the board, the musicians board for the RPO, and we were having a meeting with some of the board members of the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra, and this one doctor who was at the time a huge surgeon up at Strong, and we're talking, this friend of mine and myself were talking with him, and he meant this in a very loving, kind way, but it came across as kind of funny. And he said, I love to come on Thursday nights to hear you folks play. You give me so much joy, so much pleasure, and to hear the music, and you're so professional. And he says, and he says, keep it between us. He says, but sometimes I get my best sleep all week when you're performing.
Oh.
And I went, great. As long as you want to keep writing those checks for the big bucks, Doc, we'll give you the best sleep you can get all week.
Deal.
Deal.
I mean, other than my family, the most rewarding thing in my life is teaching and affecting students' lives. And I love to hear, somebody that I taught 12 years ago, they find me on Instagram or Facebook and share memories. Another thing I learned from you is disarming anxiety or depression or stress with humor in the lessons. That's one thing you always did, because I remember when we started, we were going through the Ted Reed syncopation book, and that wasn't too hard. But when you moved me on to C.S. Wilcox,
Yep.
I remember it was so hard, and I was so stressed out that I drew devil horns on his head on the cover, and you were like, what's going on with this? And I was like, I hate this. It's too hard. But then you would just make me laugh and have like a joke of the week or stuff like that. Or you would always have a really funny answering machine message.
Yes. I tried to keep it fun and learn something in the process, but to make it fun. And and I knew that, because I'd been there only a few years before, exactly what the students are going through when you'd walk in, and you knew you weren't prepared, but you would try to come up with some kind of a cockamamie answer, why you weren't prepared. And it wasn't like the dog ate your homework or anything like that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, and like John Beck would be able to give his students a boot when you needed it, I would do the same with my students. But for the most part, I realized that they were just here for the fun part, learn something, and make music an important part of their lives. And I had students years later would say, they've gone into, one student was a advertising consultant and whatever, but they said similar things to what you were saying is, the music you had me playing and stuff, I still listen to it to this day. I just love some of those tunes. And I was thinking about that the other day when I was putting some ideas down on paper here. And, teaching when I did and when you came up through, it would be a little bit different thing today, because like a lot of the popular music would be a little bit harder, like especially with some of the rap and hip hop and stuff. Although it's extremely rhythmic, it's a lot of it's drum machine and
Yeah.
well, not maybe drum machine, but it's definitely electronic beats. And so that would be, I mean, it would be harder to try to instill a student's, interest maybe if that's not their cup of tea. And there were times when I was teaching some stuff and I'd go, oh man, I don't like this, but kids like it, so I'm gonna write it up. Getting back to that discipline thing, remember you mentioned way back King Crimson discipline. Was it this discipline?
No,
I remember
this one was off of Three of a Perfect Pair. I'm glad you didn't give me the Discipline album because that had songs that were like in 17/8.
Yeah, and there was some stuff, and when I was trying to write that out, I thought, I'm not going to write this out. I can't figure it out. I have no idea. And what comes to mind too is Peter Gabriel's. What's the one that's in 7?
Salisbury Hill.
Salisbury Hill.
Yep.
And I said the first time I tried to play it, I'm thinking, okay, what is it? It's in 3. There's a bar of 4. No, okay, so it's 7. And Tony said when they were rehearsing it, he says it took them a while to figure it and get everything the groove properly because everyone was trying to figure it, play it in 4, and no, it's not going to work.
Yeah,
one little beat, that's all it took. But yep.
And I think the original was Alan Schwartzberg, who was a great session guy back then. But then I think people like Jerry Murata and Manu Katché really learned to smooth it out, so you didn't even think about the fact that it was in 7/4.
Yeah. So Alan was the original drummer on that?
He is, yeah. He's the original drummer on the first Peter Gabriel album.
Oh.
And I've got I guess it's okay to say this these days, I have bootlegs of him doing that first tour. It was really incredible how they pulled off all those songs live back then.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I don't think Tony was on that. Tony Levin was on that early tour, was he? I think he joined the group a little bit later.
I'm pretty sure he's on that tour because I know he was on the album and Bob Ezrin brought him in because they had done sessions with Lou Reed on the Berlin album.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a little foggy on that early. I mean, because Peter had left Genesis.
Right.
And then started up his own. That's kind of interesting too, that whole facet. Phil Collins, they just thought, well, Phil's just the drummer. Yeah, he's a good drummer. and then all of a sudden, well, yeah, but I could sing. And they go, really? So next thing you know, he's up playing, Chester Thompson's playing drums.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well for Phil.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And if people want to hear some really scary drumming by him, check out his fusion band, Brand X.
Brand X. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. Yeah, that was, yeah, in fact, he doesn't look anything like what the Phil Collins of later years was like.
Yeah. Yeah, he was like a mountain man with a big beard and long hair.
Yep. Yep.
Well, the last thing I want to say to go along with that Tony Levin quote, I remember, I think it was maybe in the 90s, you had told me something about how Tony had started being careful about what projects he would pick to record on, and they had to mean something to him. And then you said to me, for instance, have you heard his new album that he recorded in a cave? And it turned out to be this great album called From the Caves of the Iron Mountain that was Tony, Gerry, and this great wind flute player named Steve Gorn. And somewhere in the Catskills, they got in a boat and they all improvised while they're floating down a river in a cave. And then they had Chad Blake using binaural recording, so you felt like you're in the cave. I remember you and I first hearing about this going, what?
Yeah, that was
You're like, get this.
I'm not sure that was probably one of Tony's maybe it was one of his most creative moments, but maybe not from a musical standpoint, from an artistic standpoint. Yeah. He's been one. He's never been afraid to try anything.
Right,
I mean,
right.
literally. I mean, if you looked at discography over the years, and you would maybe compare it to, say, like Steve Gadd's discography.
Yeah.
Steve probably has more straight ahead type of stuff and his own band and everybody he played with and everything. Tony's is all over the place.
Very eclectic.
Because very eclectic. I mean, because there's between the Stickman and the Chapman stick and everything.
Funk fingers.
I mean, he's just And you know, the thing though that he started at Eastman as a classical trained bassist,
right?
And from the Boston area. And I just found something out just the other day, and I never knew this, but Pete, his brother Pete,
right, great
Levin,
keyboard player.
But he started out he went to Eastman or Juilliard as a French horn major. I never knew that. I always thought he was a keyboard player, but he said that he got into keyboards later on after he heard a couple of really like amazing French horn players and said, I can't do this. And so he got into playing keyboards, and he's been playing keyboards ever since.
Yeah, but look what he ended up doing, being the MD for the Gil Evans Orchestra. What an incredible musician and arranger Pete is. Yeah,
absolutely. And, you know, and again, he's one of those eclectic, you know, he'll try anything, you know, and I mean, there's a lot of stuff, and some of the stories over the years where Tony's been on tour with a few bands, and I'm sure he was just happy to get the paycheck and just go on home. You know, whatever you see, you're not going to make that one the number one claim to fame, so to speak, you know. I like the one where Steve, I asked Tony one time, I said, what's Steve up to these days? He says, oh, he's over in Italy performing with the like the Mario Lanza of Italy. And I said, what? He says, yeah, he's some famous, like, kind of pop singer, Italian pop singer. I said, Steve? He goes, yeah. He says, he pays him really well.
That's like a lot of people that don't know me well. They go, well, what kind of music do you like to play when you go out and perform? And I go, the kind that pays. I don't care if it's a hardcore band or a Dixieland band. I'll be there if you pay me well.
That's right. Just be versatile about it. Do the best you can and take the money and put it away.
That's right. You did a good job teaching me a little bit of everything. If people want to catch up on your latest adventures, I think I'm correct in saying that you are on Facebook. Is that the only social media that you're on?
Yes. Yep. That's pretty much it. And that's very limited. I check Facebook once a month, maybe.
Right.
You know, I don't want people to think that I've fallen off the face of the earth, but it's close. As I tell people, I'm about 3 centimeters away from the next upgrade, and I'm going dark.
Back to the abacus. Right.
I'm back to the Roland 707.
All right, John, well, this has been a great discussion. I only got through about half my questions. Would you be willing to do this again sometime soon? I absolutely. I've got a lot more stories for you, too. Oh, so. Good. And I really want to, next time, delve into your years with the RPO.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got some great stories with conductors and all kinds of behind-the-scenes tidbits. So we'll leave that as a teaser for part 2.
Exactly. All right. Good to talk to you, John.
Great talking to you, Malcolm. Looking forward to seeing you maybe the next time around. Take care.